Hello everybody, welcome back to the Overwatch channel on YouTube, also at overwatchproject.com. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about a book I just finished reading, Robert Monroe's Far Journeys. Robert Monroe is famous for the Monroe Institute. He's a person who claims that to have had controlled out-of-body experiences, and he has a lot of things to do with sound research, binaural beats, hemisync technology, something that lends a little bit of credibility to his ideas is that Eben Alexander, a near-death experiencer, came back and has contributed to this research on sound technology to cause like a hemisync effect in the brain because of his experience, which came much later after Robert Monroe died, but his institute goes on today. So I had done a video called What to Do If You Have an NDE or Near-Death Experience, and a commentator on my videos comment section, Chimpazilla, had recommended to me I read this book, Far Journeys, because some of the elements I've been talking about in my videos is described as in this book, and I have never really read books about OBEs or OBs because I had primarily focused on NDE or near-death experience data, because near-death experience data contains a lot of cases of verifiable out-of-body events, meaning that nurses, doctors, etc. have verified, family members, etc. have verified what patients claim to have seen out of body, even outside the hospital room or whatever they were in, which meant the NDE data was definitely something to be looked at as factual. From this, I came up with other research and the totality of research I had done on religions and materialistic science, which revealed a shocking conclusion to me. I never expected to come down this road in my research. Once I realized that the religions of the world premises were all bullshit, basically, and that reductive materialism and what pretty much atheists put out there, which is really just reductive materialism, was also absurd and bullshit, then I had to keep searching. Eventually, I came up with this idea that, hey, wait a minute, maybe this stuff isn't really all benevolent. Maybe this is some kind of prison planet. I started doing research into seeing if other people had never really looked at what the Gnostics said. I had simply looked at what Christians said about the Gnostics. Christians, mainstream Christianity paints the Gnostics as these wackos, but really when you look at the premise of the Gnostics, it kind of makes sense. I never really paid much attention to the ancient alien stuff, but here's what I want to try to explain to you. So basically, it comes down to two parts to try to come up with a clear picture of reality. The first part is a premise. Now, a premise doesn't have to have any details in it. It can be kind of vague. It is like how something works, you know. So religions have their premises, and then they have the stories to tell you about the premise. Atheism has a premise, and then it has stories like the Big Bang to tell you about their premises. The premise, if it's false, the story will definitely be false. The premise, if it's true, the story can still be wrong, but it will have elements of the truth. So the Gnostics had a premise that this reality was basically fake, and that we were like enslaved here, prisoners here, that this was a bad place to be. And the story of the Demiurge and the Archons and Sophia explain their premise. But it doesn't mean that the details of the story are accurate. I don't know exactly where they got the thing about the Demiurge. I don't know the origin of that information. Same thing with the ancient alien theorists. They have the premise that we were created, similar to the Gnostics, very similar, as a slave race, as some kind of oppressed spiritual beings. Or actually, the ancient alien theorists don't go into the spiritual side that much. It's the Gnostics that say we're like spiritual beings trapped in these physical bodies. the ancient alien theorists have a premise that we were created as some kind of slave race. And of course, then they have their story of the Anunnaki and the gold, Nibiru, and all this other stuff, which comes from some loose translations of the Sumerian texts. So, but the premise is very similar to the Gnostic premise, or has elements that are the same. And again, most people try to find benevolence, good things about our existence. But when you look at the reality of what's going on, and it's just not. Something's really wrong with our reality. So I said, well, people believe all kinds of things. I should at least give this Monroe guy a shot. So I read his book, and I looked at some of his interviews. He does seem to be sincere. He doesn't seem to be, I just found him to be credible, at least that he believes what he's telling us. So I read his book, and I was shocked to find out that with the commentator here, it was more than what he said. He describes that Monroe in his book goes into this stuff about Loosh. In chapter 12 on the paper book, it's chapter 14 in the Audible. It's chapters 14 and 15 in the Audible, 12 and 13 in the print book, talk about humanity's a reason for humanity's creation, what was revealed to him in his out-of-body adventures. The concept that we were created after quite a bit of tinkering. Earth is described as a garden to him, and we were eventually created because we make something wonderful, some kind of energy that these beings or whatever are collecting from us, called Loosh. Now, Monroe's book, if accurate, is a really great way. He inadvertently describes a really nice model of the matrix reality, and if it does work like this, it makes a lot of sense. So it also explains why there's like these different versions of life on Earth. It seems like life was stamped out, and because evolution doesn't really work, but it does if you look at Earth's history as reversioning, almost like a software being reversioned, and then the shit that didn't work out is still here. We can still find records of it. It does look more like that. It seems like life has big turnover here, and new models come online as needed. But we apparently are very good. We produce this high quality, what he was told is called Loosh. This really troubled him in chapter 12 of the book, 14 in the Audible. Troubles him greatly because, and then he goes back and these beings or whatever that reveal this information to him, then tell him, well, it's really all about love. Bingo, it's what we get from the near-death experiences. It's all about love, yada yada. So, the book is pretty interesting. Now, at the big part comes at the end, the conclusion of the book, where I think it's the last 2, maybe 3 chapters of the book. He goes into a summary of everything he learned in these far journeys. One thing is that our reality, our realm, and this comes up in the books in a couple places, is almost addicting, like a drug, to souls or energy beings that exist including we're like these energy being non-physical beings that have been lured here and trapped inside bodies. Now, he doesn't go about this as a matrix or as a reincarnation trap. He's trying to interpret this as something good, as a school, which is something that we get constantly from these ND experiences, right? That we're here on a mission, that we have some kind of we just haven't finished learning yet. See, it's almost like they're shady car salesmen. These so-called creatures or beings that the Gnostics would describe as archons are like just shady car salesmen. Just sign here, because it makes it also clear in Robert Monroe's book that everybody that's here agreed to be here. You have to agree or you can't come in. Now, once you're in, what they don't tell you maybe so much, or they claim that Robert Monroe said, they claim to tell you, but it doesn't matter. There's apparently some kind of intoxicating field. Our reality here, our material existence, from how he describes it, is extremely appealing, like a drug. It lures energy beings like me and you and others here, and we get so enticed to experience this material existence that we're willing to agree to be blanked out, in other words, born with obvious amnesia, and to agree to follow the rules of the physical world, to limit our abilities to the physical plane. Now, what ends up happening is people live here, die, and according to Monroe's observations, when they die, their energy being is released from the body, of course. I mean, when I'm talking about death, I'm talking about the death of the biological robot you're occupying right now. And he talks about ego in this book, and it's fascinating all the details he has in this book, which correspond to a lot of current data. And this book was written in the 1980s, in the early 1980s. I think it was published in 85. So it's really interesting. So he says that it's our biology, our brain, our ego, a lot of stuff that I've been talking about in my videos, folks, that I've learned through a lot of research. He's talking about in this book as a direct observation of what's going on as he's looking at it from outside. And then when we get released from our bodies, for the most part, I could have done this better. Or I want to experience being a woman now. Or I want to experience being a man now. Or I want to accomplish this. And people get sucked into recycling, to agreeing to come back in. And apparently, he also describes like a backup to get in here and experience this crap. People that, and I don't think, and from when he describes it, I'm not sure that he calls them naive, these naive souls that don't understand necessarily what they're getting themselves into. Because once they're in the system, they're hooked like a drug. And then he talks about these last timers. Now, I must be one of these last timers, folks, because there's no freaking way that I am coming back here. I understand how this system works now, and I want to get out of here. But apparently he's talking about these last timers. These are souls that have been here trapped in this reality long enough to have been able to figure out what's going on in some manner, shape, or form, and have enough energy and desire to escape this realm and go back home, wherever we actually come from. Now, this falls in line a lot with a lot of the concepts of the Gnostics' premises, and it falls somewhat in line with the ancient alien theorists, because these beings reveal themselves to also impersonate aliens in this book. So this is a book that, anybody doing this research, I'm grateful that that person on my YouTube channel recommended it. I never really looked at OOB stuff, because it's really not, folks, you just have to take this book with a grain of salt, because it's not like I can find any substantial, is very little substantial veridical data on OOBE stuff that I know of. If you know of some, please put in the links in the description below, or tell me, because there's very little on it. NDEs, there are cases all over the place. Miraculous healings like Anita Morijani, the Pam Reynolds case, the Maria Shu case. Not the distorted version that Christopher Hitchens used to peddle, but when you look at the actual data. There's so many cases. The guy who did a video on whose hand that had been disfigured since 9 years old was cured at 60 after his NDE. All kinds of veridical cases, observations made even outside the hospital room, nurses and doctors being able to verify stuff. NDE data proves we are conscious beings occupying physical bodies, and we have all these experiences. And I am sick and tired of these drones. I used to think these are soulless beings that we have, because there's always also a theory that not everybody's real, which could be, but when I read Monroe talking about these naive new souls who don't know what they're getting into, basically, I can see how some of these people, they're consumed by their material existence in one form or another, and they either attach themselves to one of these belief systems, religion, or they attach themselves to the material through atheism. And they have like these drone-like automated responses, like their egos are in complete control of what they say, how they process information. And I get that the same tired, proven wrong comments on the bottom of my videos where they toss out, well, don't pilots experience NDEs when they're in the centrifuges? That proves NDE. It's just mind-boggling. Nobody does any in-depth research into the data and what the data actually says, except for Alex from Skeptico, which he does. But that's about it. And some of my viewers, of course, know what's going on because they are with it. They are knowledgeable of what is happening. Some of my viewers are right on top of this stuff. So, archons. There's your archon. It's like they really depend on you agreeing to this stuff. You have to agree. I don't think they can make you do anything. Now, of course, this is just one way of looking at it. I could find more data from another source that could also make sense. Just because Robert Monroe's book makes sense with the facts, it is still a story. Stories can have error. But the premise, and he doesn't even address the premise I'm addressing. He tries to see this as a learning school. Which, folks, I think you had it right in chapter 12. We're a loosh farm, whatever the hell that is. Probably our excess soul energy. Because when you think about it, energy is energy, right? If we're energy beings, and we're confined in physical bodies, and our consciousness is dwindled down to this pathetic level, and crippled to the point, that most of us can't get out of our five senses, then where does the excess energy go? Maybe that's what they're farming, Now, I can't put down Robert Monroe's claims, because when I was young, I had a clairvoyant experience. I've never been able to replicate it. Monroe claims that he had an accidental, basically out-of-body experience, and then he was able to figure out how to replicate it. He may have. I had a clairvoyant experience I mentioned in my other videos when I was very young. I saw with none of my five senses. I knew that underground was basically a Native American arrowhead, and I could see it in my mind. It's the only way I could describe it. And I got out of the ground. I still have it today. I keep it in here in my computer room in a special box because it reminds me of that event. So to think that, I can disqualify what he says just because it's a fantastical story, I really can't, because people believe all kinds of absurd things that are provably wrong. I cannot prove that Robert Monroe is wrong, but I can sure as hell prove that reductive materialism is wrong, and it's a bunch of absurd bullshit. I can sure as hell go through, like I have, the entire Christian Bible, cover to cover, repeatedly, because I had to figure out what it actually meant, what it actually said, and all the research I've done in that, because I was born into a Christian family, and I had to deal with that stuff. I'm just trying to find the truth, and some people out there are, but most people aren't. It's like 1% of us have figured this out, and 99% out there not only haven't figured it out, but don't want to figure it out. They don't want to know. It's not like I'm charging money to give this information away or to point people in a certain direction to do research in. I'm not telling people what to think or how to think. I'm telling them to look at the facts and the data. And I think it should be pretty obvious what it means. And people don't even want to look. It's like the 1% in this case are giving it away, and nobody wants to take it. It's quite bizarre. So I'll link to the Monroe Institute and website, I guess, in this video. You can check out my other videos on my channel and overwatchproject.com, which there's some links there. The links section is pretty interesting. I do these intel links where you can get a lot of this information from, and links on about the Matrix. So that's it. Get the right premise, and then of course we can talk about the stories, but the premise has to be correct first. Thanks for tuning in, and see you guys later. Bye.